the director of advanced analytics at Redapt. So our division really works and helps companies, large and small companies, modernize their analytics practice, their whole department. Some of it's technology based, some of it's process and people based. So what I want to talk on today is really sort of a amalgamation of all the things that I think I've learned in services over the past 10 and 20 years, working with various companies and analytics leaders. These are companies, multiple Fortune 500 companies. Have done work in partnerships with some of the big 4 and 5 consulting firms. Redapt, of course, is based out of Seattle. So I wanted to talk about financial KPI development, kind of in an agile, rapidly changing world. As we know, we've seen a lot of changes today. So I wanted to talk about this more at a strategic level and how we help clients and our customers at a data maturity model. And then typically that turns into some technology project, but the focus of this is not necessarily on technology. So I wanted to just start with kind of a little factoid that I find very interesting, and this really leads into some of the points that I want to talk about later. But research shows that every time the size of a city doubles, the innovation or productivity per resident increases by 15%. But when companies get bigger, innovation or productivity per employee will generally go down. So you can research this, but it seems to be an odd correlation that when cities double, a lot of aspects of their output increase by 15%. And unfortunately, that includes crime, but innovation and productivity and other aspects tend to be around 15%. So that's interesting. But if we look at companies as they grow, this tends to decrease. So I'm really interested in why that is. You may have heard of an experiment. It's called the Marshmallow Experiment. So somebody put together this experiment. They gave a team of different groups of demographics. They gave them some spaghetti, dried spaghetti, not cooked. They gave them some tape and then a marshmallow. And ultimately, they had to create the tallest tower to place that marshmallow on top. I think they had a time limit, 30 minutes or so. And it was called the Marshmallow Experiment. I think it's referenced in a couple of books. So he did this with CEOs. He did this with lawyers, MBA students, and kindergartners. As you can imagine, what group do you think won? Well, if I'm bringing it up, you'd probably say, well, obviously the kindergartners, or probably wouldn't have brought it up. And that's true. So the kindergartners really whooped every group. They whooped the CEOs, the lawyers, the MBA students. And it's interesting case study. If you look at why and just the interactions between the kindergartners and how adults tend to behave, is they notice that the way that adults will typically approach this project as a group is they immediately start to figure out, all right, let's plan, let's figure out who's good at this and that, and then they'll start doing the work. Kindergartners just tend to go after the materials. They just start putting stuff together and trying things, and they failed quickly. So I find it interesting that, it really comes down to the kindergartners didn't care. They just kept trying. They started immediately. They failed immediately. And the adults tended to plan, take up a lot of time trying to figure out the hierarchies of the group. Who's better at this? Who's better at that? So the key was, I think, the interaction. So if you have some time, there's some books that reference that use case, and it's really interesting. So you can kind of put that in the side of your head. We'll come back to that. As we work with companies of all different sizes, as they move through their analytics journey, we have this maturity matrix, and I like the way that this kind of presents what we work with. There's technology, there's point solutions that do a lot of different things. Today it's AI, it's ML, that's the driving force, and a lot of the conversation and buzz is around it. But I can frankly tell you that 90% of businesses can't even get the basics right. 90% of most business questions, most things that you want to know, don't require AI and don't require ML techniques. So what we find is that the value that we present to businesses is really looking at where they are in their data maturity journey. And a lot of that is frankly helping managers, helping knowledge workers understand how to formulate business questions appropriately, how to experiment, how to do basic things like interpret results of AP tests and P scores. And this doesn't require a PhD in data science to have to do. So this matrix, most companies, if you were to look at this and try to identify where you live or where your company is currently, most of the companies that we work with will typically place a dot in the bottom left area. So if you look at it, a couple of different aspects, there's a lot on this one, but the analytical maturity dimension over here on the left, we start with basic reporting, we have some dashboards, we do some really cool analytics, and then we reach this predictive prescription mode where we can start to actually have AI or ML models say, hey, you should probably, refresh this product at this time. But frankly, a lot of companies just aren't there yet. And they haven't even mastered some of the basics. If I look at the data maturity up at the top, we go from spreadsheet, Excel spreadsheets, just everybody kind of doing their own thing. Obviously, we move towards enterprise data warehouse models and managed models that give us insights over here on the right. And then over on the scale, we move from individual to departmental, and then we start to bring in external data sources. For the culture, it's really how executives view analytics and BI. So a lot of this starts at the executives and just how they view it. I think most executives realize that to differentiate their company, they need to invest here. They need to invest in technology and people and processes, but it isn't cheap. Data scientists are cheap. High-performing analytics teams are not cheap. So what we do at Redapt is we really work to almost outsource that because we do it all the time, or augment teams that are already there. And we work across different technology stacks. So, years ago, BI was just sort of this thing, hey, give me my reports, give me my spreadsheets, show me my graphs, let me know where my numbers are. And it was seen more as a cost center. We've seen companies really push this up more to a strategic resource where all the work has been monetized and actually presented to their clients. For instance, I worked with a company called BigCommerce, so they're in the Shopify space. If you're familiar with Shopify, they have thousands of e-commerce stores. So we did a lot of internal work there, and ultimately present that work as value adds that they could pay for. If they wanted to add a purple skirt one day, the system would say, hey, this doesn't sell well this time of the year. You may want to rethink that. So ultimately, to take all that work that's done internally and move that out and monetize that is important. So this is the journey. We help companies, move up to this top right area, but there's a lot of work to be done there. I would really break this down into three primary pillars that we work with to get this done. This particular slide really just highlights those three important pillars. I'm actually not going to talk a lot about the technology side. Most executives and most CIOs, CAOs, chief analytics officers, and knowledge executives will probably agree and that technology is not the biggest problem. There's a lot of technology that can do amazing things. The first two, I think, are the biggest issues. So agile culture and organization. Our recommendation and what we see help companies really mature in this is creating and rethinking how their teams are structured. When you look at the Industrial Revolution and how parent-child and hierarchy relationships were created, this is typical manager relationships. This just doesn't, unfortunately, work well in the analytics space. So we help companies really embrace more modern hierarchy structures. So this is typically cross-functional teams that tend to blur parent-child relationships. So examples of this would be Zappos, for instance, the shoe company. They're probably one of the bigger ones in the United States that use more of a kind of a non-manager style hierarchy system. And what this really means is that it's not the Wild West, it's not anarchy, it's not like there's managers, but we restructure the organization so it's more agile. We use Agile, we use DevOps, we use Scrum methodologies at the project level, but unfortunately, companies don't do it at the higher levels. of how the org is structured. That's why organizations do these massive reorganizations. They get to a breaking point, but they do it so far between. They do it every year, every 2, every 3 years. It's because they didn't make micro changes in the organization up to that point. So for analytics, we really look at how is this done at companies? Is there one department? Does it report to, is it cross-functional? Is finance? Is the financial group? Do they have the ability to influence? Is there a huge separation between tech and finance? And is there friction there? And we strive to really create a cross-functional team that blurs those lines, because the most successful analytics teams actually don't really live in a department. They're actually very ubiquitous, and they'll move between departments, and they'll be able to respond to business challenges quickly. We treat tensions as fuel for innovation and positive change. So in analytics, we fail often, we want to fail fast. So we experiment constantly. And some of the most successful companies, Google, Netflix, these companies are running thousands of experiments at any one time. Because if the historical data doesn't support a certain decision, we must run experiments against them. So the experimental portfolio and the software and the process to make that happen will help companies implement that. So we treat tension, we treat failure as not in the pejorative, but as a good thing. Hey, let's move on, let's quickly figure out that didn't work, and let's find a solution. So we treat tensions as the fuel for that change, and we change the way the analytical structure is, because one year we may have 3 data scientists, a couple of data engineers, we have different roles, and that may be fine for a company, but 2 years later, they're in a different place. So we need to modify those roles quickly and to adapt. And the financial industry needs that the ability to adapt and change. Obviously, COVID was a prime example of that. Data literacy training. So we feel that one of the biggest pain points is that knowledge workers, managers just don't know how to structure questions, don't know how to present data, and frankly could do a lot of this themselves. And I really lay this at the feet of academia in most cases, is that really brilliant data scientists come out of universities, really brilliant MBA students come out, finance professionals. However, the merging of those two is very strange. There's just not a lot of cross work. Really smart finance professionals that wouldn't know SQL, right? They can probably work in Excel, but to really do the sophisticated work, and it really doesn't take a lot of training to get and to elevate knowledge workers to where they need to be. So on the second pillar, there's the modeling piece. And modeling, with unstructured data and data lakes and sort of the Wild West, just throw all your data in a data lake. Of course, it sounds great, but in reality, things need to be modeled correctly. Our business processes need to have the right model in place so that we can make good decisions. So agile reality modeling is hyper important. So gone are the days of just taking 12 months to create an enterprise data warehouse. We need results quickly, and we need to do them with a Scrum Agile methodology. Buy where appropriate. So there are industry model vendors out there that actually sell KPIs and models that are ready to go. Microsoft actually acquired one of the biggest and are creating a product behind the scenes. And what this will do is bring a lot of KPIs in finance and insurance, or what vertical that you work in. You're going to get 70 or 80% of all the models and KPIs you probably want, but there's always that 20 or 30% that's specific to your business and you'd want to differentiate. I would argue that modeling is the most important function of the analytics department, is to set up the data so that the data scientists can do their work and the knowledge workers can find answers. So those are the two that I really wanted to talk about today. The technologies out there, obviously, cloud and a lot of different vendors are out there for visualization and AI and ML. So I won't spend a lot of time there. I do want to mention there are other process areas at the bottom that we know are important: governance and operations and data management strategies, which we can help companies take care of, but I won't touch on those in particular today. So Agile Scrum methodologies, we see in app development all the time, but we don't see it really adapted to data ops or data or AI too much. So we really help companies modernize here. So just enough designed up front. JDUF is really just, hey, let's get what we need quickly and let's do this in sprints. So instead of taking 12 months to create an enterprise data warehouse, let's do what we need to do to get the high priority questions answered. So we do our agile modeling quickly. We do our ETL development or test-driven development, prototyping, and we do this in sprints. So it's Scrum, it's agile, but it's really modernized towards what we call data ops. And we help companies really get there. And this is actually quite hard because with data and analytics, there's so many different dependencies, there's so many different things at play here that it tends to be a difficult project to tackle. We changed the Scrum. So if you look at Scrum and Agile methodologies, some of this is product management or how you manage your backlog. This is an example of something we would do where we change epics and features. We changed it a little bit. So instead of epics, we call them analytics projects. Business objectives, metrics, and value. These are what we use at the feature level. So we help companies look at their backlog, look at their Scrum or Agile methodologies and say, how could we change this slightly so that it works with analytics? Because it's not quite on target for analytics and data science work. So we do some modifications here, but the essence of the Scrum and Agile methodologies are still there. We also help companies really, when we ask business questions and leaders that say, why did sales drop for this particular product, or why did loan volume decrease here? Why is, financial services, why is, these credit card, processing events down for this particular month? So these type of questions, if the historicals isn't there, we have a tried and true process of quickly getting to the answers. So we have what's called a data science flow and a decision science flow. And we can use Jira, we can use Azure DevOps, we can use whatever project management software the client wants to use, but it's really about picking the right methodologies. And like I said, I truly believe that 80 to 90% of all business questions can be answered with relatively simple methodologies. It doesn't need AI and ML, but you do need a solid process to get to it quickly and not spend a lot of time really just doing busy work. So modeling, I think, is one of the most important things. Here's just a quick screenshot of just, if I looked at a high level, most businesses I ask, show me your dimensions and facts, show me every event, show me every discrete event and how all the dimensions intersect. You don't need to know what that is, but this is over on the left is what we sometimes call a bus matrix in the analytics world. In this case, it's a high-level view of every business event that any leader would care about as it intersects with the dimensions, so customers, suppliers, what have you. That should be available to anybody, any knowledge worker. If you're at a company right now and you can't look at an event matrix like this and know how can I analyze events against my dimensions, that's a problem. So we help companies really create that legend, create a roadmap to get there. And then each facts and dimension, of course, has stories that we develop against. So that's what we call beam modeling. That's a process that we use to get businesses there quickly. So KPI development. I mean, KPIs are important. It's how we measure performance. And we really strive to create a cohesive KPI matrix. So I took Make-A-Wish. It's obviously Make-A-Wish is a nonprofit. I just took one that you guys would probably be familiar with just to give you a simple use case for what we work with. So we took Make-A-Wish, we have the permission to use this, and Make-A-Wish obviously helps grant wishes to children. So what we do is we look at the mission statement of the company. We look at the policy levels and we say, what are the achievements? And a lot of this really, the simplicity is quite deceptive. We've used Six Sigma, we use other performance enhancing methodologies, but frankly they're heavy-handed and they're kind of going out of style. Just that's one of the reasons. So we use something that's simple that we can quickly turn around and create deliverables from. So if you look at Make-A-Wish, we looked at what's a top level organizational achievement. In this case, they want to create happier children. We took this technique because you can really use it for anything, whether you're basket weaving or you're selling loans or you're selling credit cards, whatever, you can use this and it could apply. So we said, what's the achievement? Not to be confused with behavior. What's the achievements? In this case, a happier child. And we look at a happier child and we go through workshops and we say, all right, there's three areas. We look at quality, quantity, and cost, and there's 9 areas that we ask the business to really come up and help come up with the KPI. So we have accuracy, class, novel. So accuracy would be how accurate was that happier child? Did they get the wish they wanted? Well, class would be what's the quality, and the novelty, is it different than something else? So we go through a KPI process and we visit all 9 of these, and we come up with the most important KPIs and we do some brainstorming. Pretty straightforward. It seems rather simple, but you'd be surprised at what KPIs are missing, what are wrong, or don't cohesively line up at the mission statement. So what we typically find is KPIs at different departments don't line up. They tend to cause friction, and we see people incentivized to do different things that don't create a cohesive strategy for the business. So we want to create a KPI matrix that really allows leaders to see everything rolled up, all achievements, all KPIs against them. So we start at the top level and then we move down. So a happier child would be broken down to a happier artifact created. So this artifact could be that Brad Pitt said, "Hey, I'm gonna have lunch with you," or it could be a trip to Disneyland. Whatever that artifact is, that's what they decided to go with. So the creation of this artifact, what does it take to create that artifact? And then we have to put that with an event. So the event is, again, every achievement. Again, we go through these 9 areas and we create KPIs from them. And ultimately you get this beautiful cohesive KPI matrix that makes sense, and the business can agree on it. So this allows them to see the dark spots that they currently want to see that they can't. And a lot of times it exposes KPIs that are frankly meaningless. One of the biggest shoe manufacturers in the world, we helped them. They had a lot of issues in finance with really understanding their total cost of ownership for cloud. They had Azure, they had AWS, they had Alibaba and GCP and Rackspace. They used products like Aptio and Cloud Health, which are pretty popular, but they're point solutions and they're somewhat limited. So we had to really fill in the gaps for them. So we took the GL and said, look, let's go ahead and enhance the GL. And we do this at a lot of companies. So we start with the GL just because it's the nice starting point. We remodeled the GL. A lot of times companies are handcuffed with their accounting software, whether it's Hyperion or financial management or whatever they're using. There's not a lot of customizability that they don't have, or of course Oracle or whoever can do that for them, but millions of dollars is required, and we can do it a lot cheaper. So we typically will use multiple products, or potentially one, wherever they're at currently. So we can use GCP, we can use AWS or Azure products to do this, but we typically enhance the GL. So for this company and for specifically their finance department to understand the total cost of ownership of all of their workflows across all different cloud products. And to do that, we had to really expand the GL and to enhance it. So we remodeled the GL and we enhanced it to give them the ability to do that. And that's really the starting point for all of it. And really what they wanted to ask, if you look at this, I call them hierarchy pillars, but we have this concept of a TCO, total cost of ownership object. And one of their big questions was, how much money do we spend on bot mitigation? And if you think about a company that is quite popular, they actually spend millions, tens of millions of dollars on bot mitigation. So if you look at Xbox or PS4s, when these things came out, bots would buy them up. So they actually spent a significant amount of money mitigating and denying bots the ability to do that. So they didn't really know how much they spent. So the amount of time for them to actually put together and analyze how much of our cloud resource spend was dedicated to bot mitigation was ridiculous. Analysts took weeks, multiple analysts to even get to a number that was somewhat where it needed to be. So with this new system and new modeling technique, we can do value stream hierarchy pillars. So you can look at costing, you can look at a lot of things from a lot of different perspectives, but it requires the appropriate model. And most point solutions don't have the customized ability to do this at this point. So we'll come in and do that for them. They still use Cloud Health, they still use Aptio, for instance, but we'll fill in the spots where they need help. Just a quick example, just a quick case study here. United Federal Credit Union, they had really a strategic initiative to help customer service. They had a lot of initiatives around customer service. So specifically, they wanted to analyze call volume. So they had 40,000 calls per month. This was a Cisco phone system. and they really wanted to see how well were we performing. So sentiment analysis. So in this case, we used Azure Cognitive Services to really do some quick sentiment. Now we can use other cloud services, but their footprint was already within Azure itself. So they did a lot of use cases. We allowed sentiment change over the course of the call, so we can pull up any agent and say, what is a KPI? So one of their KPIs was how can the agent move a angry customer to a happy customer? And throughout the call, the sentiment would have been gauged. So we have reports that could quickly see that. So that would be sentiment change over the call time period. So to do this on 40,000 calls a month is ridiculous. A manual person could not do that. So we used Cognitive to quickly set this up. It really analyzed the recordings and gave us some really sophisticated sentiment reporting around that. So that was their customer service initiative, so great success there. So I just wanted to highlight another case study. That is it. Thank you. Sorry, guys. Yeah, thanks for your time.